they're not based on facts. They're not based on the laws of nature. They're based on judgments.
I mean, that's the funny thing about beliefs is they have exclamation points at the other side of it. And
our personal problems, our interpersonal relationship problems, even our geopolitical problems. I really mean it when I say it.
Makes sense.
because I think the first step for somebody to even consider or entertain disputing something is to find out that it came from somewhere else.
Absolutely. And just to be clear, I don't think we can just make it up out of whole cloth. That beliefs, the definition of a belief, my definition, is a conviction that is open to revision based on new evidence. So you want your beliefs to be grounded in reality, right? They're not very useful if they're not grounded in reality. They're just delusional. However, the bar is a different amount of evidence than whether it's a fact, whether it's an objective truth. So I think with beliefs, we can hold them lightly, and most importantly, choose the ones that serve us. You can't make up facts, but you can adopt beliefs that serve you better, whether or not they are true. And that's the big revelation of the book, is that beliefs are tools, not truths. Beliefs are tools, not truths. Maybe the best way to illustrate this is to tell you kind of what most changed in my life. There's a chapter in the book called "You Don't Have Relationship Problems, You Have Perception Problems." Because just as our beliefs dictate what we are able to see, what we think is reality, even though that's totally not true. What we perceive as reality is not reality. It's our perception of reality that we are constructing in our heads. We actually all live in this simulation that's being created in our own minds at every given second, because the brain just can't process all that information. So it has to filter it through our beliefs. So just as we don't see reality clearly, we don't see other people as they are. We see other people as we believe them to be, or more accurately, as we are. And so let me share kind of how I changed my beliefs when it came to my relationship with my mom, which was a pretty difficult relationship. So a few years ago, it was her 74th birthday, and I wanted to do something nice for her. So I decided to send her some flowers. The problem was that I was living in Singapore. My mother was in Central Florida at the time, where I grew up. And it was a real hassle to get her flowers. I had to call the florist 12 hours away, 12 time zones away, make sure that they would send the right flowers and the florist had good reviews, all this work to send her flowers. And I put in all this work, and I thought, you know what? I went to bed and I said, you know what? I'm sure that after all this effort, after all this time and money, my mom's going to call me tomorrow morning and she's going to say, what a good son I am. Well, that didn't happen, because what happened was I called her up the next day and I said, hey, Mom, happy birthday. Did you get the flowers I sent? To which she said, yes, I got the flowers. Thank you. But just so you know, they were half dead. So don't use that florist again. To which I said, well, that's the last time I buy you flowers. Something like that. And I kind of put my foot in it, and it went over about as well as you'd expect. Yeah. Now, my wife was sitting right next to me, because we took the call together, and she heard all this, and she turns to me and she says, would you like to do a turnaround on this? To which I said, no, I do not want to do your touchy-feely hocus-pocus mumbo-jumbo. I need to vent, because that's what we do, right? You got to speak your truth. You got to tell people how you've been offended. You can't bottle up your feelings. You have to tell people what they've done to you, right? Well, turns out that the psychology literature says that this is a terrible idea. That in fact, research shows that when we vent, we're doing nothing but making this effigy of people. We're creating this model, this belief around people. There she goes again. She always does stuff like this. This is so like her. We don't see people as they are. We see people as we believe them to be. So every time we vent, we're reinforcing, and we're going to look for more of whatever it is we're venting about. So I didn't do that. Instead, I wrote down the belief that was causing me suffering. The belief that was causing me suffering was, my mother is too judgmental and hard to please. Okay, that was causing me suffering. Even when she wasn't in the room, I was thinking about it. I was ruminating on it. It made me less motivated to have this relationship with her, which is kind of a hallmark of a limiting belief. That's how you know if it's a limiting belief. Do you feel less motivated because of that belief? And does it cause you suffering? So I had the good sense to write down that belief. And then I went through these 4 steps that come from what's called inquiry-based stress reduction. This was a technique first pioneered by a woman by the name of Byron Katie. And she really actually channeled this all the way back to Aristotle. Even Aristotle, 2,000 years ago, had a similar process. But she really codified it into this now scientifically validated process. And what you do is you ask yourself 4 questions. The first question is it true? Is that belief true? Well, obviously, I just told you what happened. Like, that's a fact. My mother is super judgmental, right? Like, do we really need to debate that? Stupid question. Let's skip question number one. How about question number two? Question number two, is it absolutely true? It sounds like the first question, but it's a little bit different because it has absolutely true in there. So absolutely means it has to be 100% true. There's no other possible explanation, right? Beyond a doubt. No other way to see it. Yeah, you know what? If I'm honest with myself, there might be another reason. I don't know what that other reason might be, but okay, I have to admit, maybe it wasn't a fact that my mother is judgmental, right? That's not one of Isaac Newton's laws. It's the belief. Okay, fine. So let's skip. Let's go to the next question. Question number three. Who would I be without this belief? Well, if I didn't have this belief, I'd be much better off. Like, I wouldn't feel so burdened and impatient and, become this 13-year-old version of myself. That'd be great. I'd feel lighter. I'd be better. And then finally, who am I when I hold on to this belief? Well, when I have this belief, I kind of become this 13-year-old version of myself, which I don't really like. So in just 4 questions, I figured out that the belief was just a belief. It wasn't a fact. So it may not actually be true, that it wasn't really serving me, and I'd be way better off without it. Now we do a turnaround. Okay, so a turnaround is when we do something that the brain hates. We ask the brain to try and change its mind. And your brain hates this. All of our brains hate that. I know people listening to this are thinking, yeah, okay, this guy has some crazy ideas, but that wouldn't work for me because, you've never met my mom, or I have this condition, or I have this situation. There's no way. So my beliefs are facts. And that's your brain fighting tooth and nail to get you to not change your mind. Your brain hates changing its mind, but give this a try. So what you have to do, you have to ask yourself, could the exact opposite be true? Whatever's causing you, whatever belief that you think is causing you suffering. He did this to me. She offended me. The world's at war, the crazy economy, AI is taking our jobs. Whatever belief is causing you suffering that you think is a fact, just try this. Could the exact opposite be true? AI is not taking our jobs. The economy is actually not that bad. I'll be fine. I'm actually good with money. I'm not bad with money. There is plenty of time. Not that I'm running out of time. You take any of these limiting beliefs and you just ask yourself, could the exact opposite be true? So for me, what's the opposite of my mother is too judgmental and hard to please? My mother is not too judgmental and hard to please. How could that be true? Seems like a fact to me. How could it be true? Well, she did thank me for the flowers, and she was just saying a statement of fact that the flowers weren't so great. So maybe she was trying to help me, not hurt me. Maybe she just didn't want me to get scammed by this florist. Okay, well, now I have 2 beliefs. Let's go for a third. Instead of my mother's too judgmental and hard to please, I am too judgmental and hard to please. Could that be true? Maybe, because I had rehearsed in my head that if I was going to do this nice thing for her, then I deserved effusive praise. And when that praise didn't come, I lost it. And I became this 13-year-old version of myself, which I didn't really like. So who was being judgmental there? I kind of was, wasn't I? Okay, here's a 4th belief. I am too judgmental and hard to please towards myself. Could that also be true? Well, that one actually hurt the most because that turned out to be the most true, in that when I did this thing that took a lot of time and effort and it didn't work out, I felt incompetent. I felt like I'd screwed up. And when I felt crummy, this is called a misattribution of emotion. So when I felt bad, we all do this. When we feel crummy, we look for someone else who we can blame, who's not us. And that's what I did. So I blamed it on her because I felt bad. I felt that I had messed up. So I was being too judgmental and hard to please towards myself, right? So now, which one of those 4 beliefs is true? All of them? None of them? Who cares? Beliefs are tools, not truths. One belief, the first one, my mother is too judgmental and hard to please. There's only one way out. She had to change so I could be happy. The only way that I could stop suffering is if she apologized and said, oh, I messed up. Let me tell you, you don't know my mom. That ain't going to happen. that people have their own perspectives, right? People have their own beliefs. And she had her own justifications for why she said what she said. So me sitting here waiting and saying, I'm going to hold my breath until you change your mind and you apologize, I would suffocate. So why would I depend on someone else to change so I could stop suffering? That's stupid. Instead, now I have 3 other beliefs that serve me way better. It doesn't matter which one was true. Do I really have to argue with her about whether she was being judgmental or not? Who cares? Here are 3 beliefs that increase my motivation to work on this relationship with my mom and decrease my suffering. Why would I not adopt a different belief?
Wow. I'm glad I took a couple of notes on that. It seems that having options is a delightful idea, first of all. But before I go a little bit further on this, what does it take? I mean, so I teach some things like this as well. Like the questioning, I always, first you have to distance yourself, a little cognitive distancing, a little Viktor Frankl stuff, and at least get in this space. But that takes a decision too, because the funny thing about beliefs is that if you believe in your beliefs, you actually defend them and you justify them. And that's why all this funny behavior happens. But you have to have a reason to want to dispute them, and even go even further and maybe dispute whether or not you're part of the problem. I call it the sorting filter. I always give this analogy that you have the right and the ability, and it's really about protecting your own happiness and fulfillment, of running things through the sorting filter, which is asking questions,
Mm.
and very often it will dilute, or even downgrade, or maybe even make you realize it, like you said, it doesn't even matter. It has
Yeah.
nothing to do with me and things. But my question to you is, if we look at our belief systems and our ego and all of that stuff that's involved, I kind of look at it as like a 200,000 ton oil tanker that is on its way and on course to where it always goes. And here we are, we're going to like go tap on the captain's shoulder and be like, hey, let's go a different way. That's
Mm.
not easy to do. What does it
Mm.
take for somebody to decide to even dispute or contemplate alternative perspectives?
Yeah, it's a terrific question. So beliefs are like our face.
Mm.
That limiting beliefs by definition are always hidden to us, just like your face. We all have a face. But if I said right now, look at your face, go ahead, look at your face. How does one look at their face? We all have a face. We can look at other people's faces, just like we can see other people's limiting beliefs. Oh, I can see my mom's limiting beliefs. I can see, my colleagues' limiting beliefs. I can see everybody I know's limiting beliefs. I can see theirs, but we can't see our own.
Right.
Right? To us, they feel like facts, not beliefs. This is the way it is. This is the way I am. This is the way the world is. It's a fact. No, it's a belief. You just can't see it. And so how do we look at our own face? The same way we look at our limiting beliefs. We have to reflect. For our face, we have to take out a mirror, right? We can't do it on our own. We have to have a tool. And that tool is a mirror to look at our own face. And for our limiting beliefs, we have to go through this process of deciding that we are going to reflect. Now, how do you find these limiting beliefs? You look for the muck. That's what I call it. The muck is where you are stuck. What is that area of your life that's causing you suffering in any regard? If you're not experiencing any suffering, congratulations, you've reached nirvana. But for everybody I've ever met, certainly me, lots of suffering, turns out needless suffering. And I wrote the book for me, but I'm constantly I still use the techniques for the book every single day, 100 times a day to decrease my suffering. But I have to do that reflection process. I have to constantly remind myself of my liberating beliefs to get rid of my limiting beliefs. And so what you have to do is to look at that area of your life where you're stuck. Look at that New Year's resolution that you've had year after year that hasn't gotten done. That relationship that continues to annoy you and feels totally stuck. That thing in your life that you've craved and desired, but hasn't happened, even though you know exactly what to do, you're not doing it, not going to the gym, not taking care of your health, not taking care of your personal finances, whatever it is, the stuff you know what to do, you just don't do it. And what you will always find underneath is some kind of limiting belief. That's what's underneath there. And that limiting belief is typically driven by fear and some kind of irrational fear that you just don't want to deal with. And so you escape it, right? You just try and not even think about it. And so that's why it becomes more and more and more hidden to you the more times you push it away and you start believing it's a fact. And we hear this all the time. I'm no good at this. There's no time.
Right.
This is too hard. I'm not a so-and-so type of person. I'm not a money person, or I'm not a whatever. You hear this all the time. All these, I'm having a senior moment. That's my ADHD. I mean, it just goes on and on. And as a person with ADHD, I'm telling you, like these labels, we love them, right? They're incredibly comforting because it makes us feel like it's a fact. But is it a fact? And even if it is a fact, is it serving you? Like, is that belief? I'll tell you for myself with my ADHD label, when I got a diagnosis, it was incredibly comforting because, this explains everything. This is why I've had so much trouble.
Mm.
Then I noticed that almost immediately, every time I would have a distraction, and frankly, who's not distracted these days? We're all feeling distracted. Right. Every time I felt distracted, my brain went to, there's my ADHD. And right. Now I would start this limiting belief vicious cycle of, well, if I can't concentrate, I'm not going to do a good job in this presentation. And what if I don't make my deadline? And then the book won't get done. If the book doesn't get done, I'm going to be in big trouble. And what if I have to do this? And I kept spiraling with what originally was supposed to help me, because now my label became my limit. Right. And so it doesn't serve me to think I have a chronic illness that I'm never going to be able to fix. That doesn't serve me. There's my ADHD. I'm having a senior moment. I'm not a morning person. I'm a Sagittarius. Why do we keep telling ourselves this bullshit? Even if it's true, who cares? It's not helping us. It's like, temporary candy. It makes us feel good on the inside because it gives us an excuse to not to do anything about it, but it's increasing our suffering. So instead, I don't tell myself, I have a chronic condition, ADHD, that I'm never going to get rid of, and all this spiraling, all this anxiety that was created from it. I tell myself, hey, I'm learning a new skill. I'm learning a new skill. I'm learning to become focused. Great, right? Now, that doesn't mean that I'm where everybody else is. Maybe I'm at a different point, right? Because a diagnosis is a map that, okay, here's where you want to go. Here's where you are. Here's how to get to that path. A diagnosis should give you that path. And maybe on that map, you're starting from a different place than other people are. But to believe that you are the map is stupid. You're not the map. You're using the map. And if it's not serving you, find a different map. And so that's what this is all about. It's asking ourselves critically, wait a minute. I'm getting told that I'm a such and such and that the world is this way. Have I ever actually taken out those beliefs to not necessarily analyze, are they true? Because you're never going to get the answer. You're never, like, look at ADHD. There's no blood test. There's no x-ray. It's a subjective test, folks. I took the test. The test asks you, how often do you feel distracted? Never, sometimes, often. Well, to me, I feel distracted very often, but compared to who? I've never been in your brain. How do I know how often you're distracted? So what am I comparing myself to? It's just a subjective assessment. And so you have to remind yourself constantly that, the things that we keep getting told aren't always in our best interest, that even our own brains don't tell us things that are in our best interest, that your brain, why do we even have limiting beliefs? We have limiting beliefs because our brain wants to keep us safe, because the brain doesn't want you to be happy. The brain doesn't want you to flourish. The brain doesn't want you to meet your full potential. The brain doesn't give a shit about any of that stuff. The only thing your brain cares about is keeping you alive so that you can procreate. That's how evolution works, folks. So your brain is constantly trying to keep you safe. It just wants you to survive. So the best thing it can tell you to do is what you've done in the past. Because what you did in the past kept you alive back then. So it's probably going to work to keep you alive in the future, which means your brain is constantly whispering these limiting beliefs so that you keep getting pulled into passivity. Passivity, it turns out, is our default state. That's what your brain constantly wants you to do. But if that's not good enough for you, if you want to stop suffering, if you want to flourish, if you want to unlock your true potential, you have to consciously fight those limiting beliefs and replace them with these liberating beliefs.
Yeah, and that's it. You'd have to want to do that. You'd have to want that outcome. I just came up with a genius idea for a new product for you, by the way. Are you ready for this? And it's yours.
I'm ready.
It's yours.
Lay it on me.
Okay. So I go pick up a mirror and do what you said. Typically, when we pick up a mirror, we're going to look and do our makeup and check our teeth and see if we have any boogies or anything. But I think that what we're going to sell through your company is something called the Nirer.
The Nirer. Actually, my daughter beat you to this. She said the same thing.
Damn it. Damn it.
Yeah, the Nirer. I love it. And it says, is this belief serving you, or something like that?
Right. My favorite question, I'm sure your daughter's wonderful, but I'm just not a fan of her right now. But
you didn't TM it.
my favorite question to ask, and this is one of those that I teach in my book, is what else might be true?
Yeah.
And I ask myself that all the time.
So
And
good.
what's funny about this is kind of like this whole funny thing of people saying that they have to get out of their own way. This was not a planned question, but you just triggered it. We're talking about limiting beliefs,
Mhm.
but here we are as parents, and we're hopefully the parents listening here, we're actually trying to teach our children that they can do anything that they want. Is there danger in that end of beliefs where you could find yourself in trouble because you think that you're impervious and nothing can stop you, and you have no way of gauging when you're making a stupid mistake and things? Because I have spent a lot of my problems in life have come from being overconfident and cocky.
Yeah.
Anything to say on that?
Absolutely. And in fact, this is where I take self-help to the mats, because one of the
Right.
chapters in the book is called The Negative Side of Positive Thinking. That
Yeah.
there is a real dark side to just, cockeyed optimism and blind faith and positive thinking and manifesting. And it's so popular these days, but actually the research shows not good things. That we
Mm.
know that just thinking about the outcomes, that you just having, just thinking it's all going to work out, turns out to have really negative consequences. Gabrielle Oettingen was a researcher who did this study where she took people and she asked them to do this manifesting exercise. Do a vision board, think about the future, about the outcome you want, the beach body, the imagine your future mansion with the love of your life, do all this visioning exercises. She had students in one study visualize, manifest the A they were going to get on their next exam. And what she found was that when people did this, their blood pressure dropped, they became more relaxed, and
Mm.
in follow-up calls, turns out did less than other people did who didn't do the manifesting exercise to actually go get the things that they were manifesting.
Mm.
So when we manifest, we don't realize there's this real downside to the fact that you think, well, let go and let God,
Right.
right? And we forget God helps those who help themselves, right? That you have to actually go out and do it. So if all you're doing is manifesting and saying, well, I'm vibrating at the frequency of the universe at the right quantum level, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of this is promoted by people who have another course to sell you or another retreat to sell you because you're not manifesting hard enough. You're not vibrating hard enough. And it turns out to be actively harmful. Like you actually become less likely to get what you want, because the right way to do this is not magical thinking. Because remember, the definition of beliefs are convictions that are open to revision based on new evidence. You have to look for that evidence. And to properly visualize, what you have to do is called mental contrasting. Mental
Mm.
contrasting is when you contrast the thing you want with the feeling of the obstacle in your way. So this is the way that athletes actually visualize. Athletes, they don't visualize the gold medal, they don't manifest the trophy. They visualize, what am I going to do physically as well as psychologically when that barrier comes, when
Right.
that obstacle is in my way. And the most important part for most of our goals, it's that mental part. It's how will I prepare for the pain, which inevitably will come. If you don't prepare for the pain, if you just, let go and let God, if you just manifest your problems away, when that tough time happens and you're not getting what you want and it's not happening for you, you're not prepared because you don't know emotionally how to deal with it. So the right way to do it is to visualize, okay, so for me, I used to be clinically obese, not just overweight, but actually clinically obese. And so what I started visualizing was, okay, when I go to this party and someone offers me a piece of chocolate cake, how will I feel? How will I respond? What will I say? So I was preparing for the pain, and I had to practice that, because just sitting there and saying, oh, I want a beach body, that doesn't mean that doesn't help me resist the chocolate cake. So that's the right way to visualize, is to visualize how you will feel, how you will prepare for the pain when it inevitably comes.
Oh God. I would be ashamed to show you at the notes that I took with this book. I read a lot, and it's so funny. It's like a weird paradox. When you find a book that you really like, it's actually a nightmare because you just have to keep stopping and writing stuff down. And like we might have to do like a part 2 on this, because I'm
Happy
realizing
to.
this.
There's a lot we didn't cover. There's so much we
Oh
didn't
my
talk about.
God. Oh my God. I do want to cover inherited beliefs. And, I resonated so much. I went on, in my book, I talk about the fact that I went on a religious tour, a religion
Mm,
tour, because I just didn't connect with any religion, and my parents didn't
mm,
force it on me. And I went through this phase of my life when I thought that maybe I should. And it's really funny. And I went around and I learned about all these religions. And what I came to find myself was that I liked something in all of them. So I decided to
Yeah.
choose them all. And that's how I found my way to Buddhism, because it was more of a philosophy. But I know that you did a lot of work on religions, and you did it in such an eloquent way that it doesn't step on anybody's toes, but you do point out quite a few things that I think are helpful for people. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So I was, I was looking for, again, solving my own problem here, in that I kept coming across research about how psychologically beneficial prayer is. That people who pray live longer, they make more money, they have more friends, they contribute more to their community. A lot of good things seem to happen for people who pray. They have fewer incidences of mental health issues like depression, anxiety disorder, substantially less. So I kind of thought, well, that's nice for them, but I don't have any kind of religious faith. So that's not for me. How could I possibly benefit with this? Turns out, however, that prayer works even without faith.
Yeah.
That there's something apparently from what we know from these psychological studies, that there's a protective effect, a psychologically protective effect to prayer. And so you don't have to have faith to pray. And so what I did was I went to 5 religious leaders. It sounds like the setup for a joke, but this is exactly what I did. I went to a rabbi, a priest, an imam, a swami, and a monk, and I asked them all the same question. How does one pray when you have doubts about God, right? So for someone like me, and it turns out people like me are the majority in the United States of America. We call them nuns, N-O-N-E, not the Catholic nuns, the N-O-N-E, not the N-U-Ns. And it turns out that that's the largest religious group in America today, are people who have no particular faith. The problem is that though of those people, many of them call themselves spiritual, but not religious. We hear this all the time. I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. Well, did you know that those people have actually the worst psychological outcomes? This is something we should know about, that calling yourself spiritual, but not religious, so not having any kind of traditional faith practice, turns out you will have statistically higher likelihood of depression and anxiety disorders than people who do have some kind of faith tradition. So for people like me, that's kind of scary, right? Like, what is it that I'm missing out on these psychologically protective effects that have been kind of locked out from me? So I wanted to ask this question, like, can I still participate? Can I still pray? Or would that not even happen? Turns out you absolutely can.
Right.
That there's no monopoly on prayer. It's free. It has all these amazing benefits. And so now one of my practices, so I have a practice every morning, but I also, whenever I see a religious institution, whether that's I spend a lot of time in Singapore. So whether that's a Buddhist temple or a mosque or a synagogue or a church, if the doors open and they'll let me in, I'll just walk in and pray.
Right.
Sometimes I'll even go to services. There's some real benefits to doing that. And so part of what I'm advocating for, again, beliefs are tools, not truths. That for most of my life, I had this bar that, well, if I don't agree with every single thing that's in your holy text, I can't participate, because it's not a fact. And if it's not a fact, I don't want anything to do with it. Well, it turns out that was stupid because there's so many benefits that you can get from these traditional practices. They're there for a reason. So I take out a lesson from each of the 5 faiths that I interviewed, that anyone, whether you have faith, that's terrific, that's great. And if you don't have a particular a spiritual background or a faith practice from a traditional background, you can still implement practices from each of these 5 faiths to build your own secular prayer.
Yeah, I love that. I have this weird thing where, I've spoken on some big stages, and I never talk about religion. And maybe that's why the religious people are afraid of me, because I'm not stating my platform. I don't talk about Buddhism or anything like that. So very often I will get approached after with these people that claim that I need saving and stuff. So that's funny. But what I find, because I have the same philosophy as you, there's so many things about you, your book, your work, and you yourself that I align with. If I'm at a seminar or a convention and I'm speaking, or I'm just a guest, and I find out that there's some sort of a gathering, a church or whatever, I go. I think it's cool. I mean, for me,
Cool.
like I said, I think prayer is super cool. But what's funny is I very often get attacked there. You know what I mean? Like if you go into a house, you might be invited in there, but you can pose a threat if you're not vested in a belief like other people. So this is a perfect segue. This is one of I told you this. I'm just I already wrote a blog about this and talked to you before we even met. I just loved this story you told about. I have a lot of friends in Singapore and Malaysia, and you were just talking about that option that's very often on a form that kind of coincides, and you know what I'm talking about. And it's like perfectly connected with this. And this is this concept of being a free thinker.
Right.
I think it's so fascinating. So I'd love you to just talk about where you came up with that. And God, I wish everybody had that option, but it also has it's a double-edged sword and everything. But what did I say here? I said, do you see being a free thinker as the ability to stay open, like to not look into a belief too quickly? Is that what it is? Or is it kind of like a way of just denouncing everything else and just, is it a religion in itself? So tell us a little bit about
Mm,
free thinking.
sure. Yeah, so this was a something that I encountered when I moved to Singapore. I've lived there for 6 years, and they had it on a little form of like, what is your faith? And one of them, so there was atheist, and then there was a bunch of different religions, and there's also free thinker. And it turns out that free thinker is kind of its own bucket. The nice thing is that it's not exclusionary. That you can be a free thinking Christian, you can be a free thinking Muslim, you can be a free thinking Buddhist, you could be a free thinker, anything, because a free thinker is someone who has what I call a constructive analysis of their faith. So they have this interpretation where they don't demand certainty. They use religion not necessarily as a faith, meaning a conviction that does not require evidence. They use it as something that does require evidence, as a belief, a tool, that beliefs are tools, not truths. So they don't hold religion up to that standard of, well, it has to be true, nor do I have to accept it with blind faith. I can interpret it constructively. So I don't have to believe that, oh, everything that was written here is exactly, from the divine and it happened exactly the way it was. No, I don't have to believe that. I just have to believe that it makes me a better person to others, and it enhances my life. That's okay. So it just holds it's a person who holds a different bar towards the truthfulness of a particular religion. Maybe they have doubts, and I think doubts are great. I think that's what protects us from blind faith, which I think can be very dangerous. So yeah, you can be a free thinking any one of these religions. And I think, not only do we as people who want to participate in these faith practices, we can look at this differently. This is a new interpretation that I didn't used to have. I thought I was just excluded completely. I think, kind of like what you were saying before, I think we need to encourage religious institutions to also treat people differently.
Right.
Like, why do we have this purity test? Like, is it any surprise that people are leaving organized religion when they have to profess that they believe everything without question? No, that's really stupid. You shouldn't go to those churches. You shouldn't go to those mosques that demand of you that you have to have a purity test. Does anybody ask the Pope if he believes in everything? No, nobody asks him. They just assume. So why don't we have the same standard for ourselves? That I don't think you should be asked whether you believe absolutely everything, nor should we demand that our religious institutions have to preach everything that we ourselves only think is fact. So I think if that happened, we can get, we should patronize the religious institutions that welcome people who say, you know what, I do have doubts, but I want to participate. I want the benefits of this community, of this tradition, of the lessons that are thousands of years old that I'm reminding myself on a frequent basis through this power of prayer.
It's so fascinating. It's perfect that you wrote Indistractable, because it almost needed to be your project before this one, because that's a big part of this. I think that it's so important for people to know not only where their beliefs come from, but where, I've been talking a lot about the fact that which we consume ends up being that which we assume. So if beliefs are essentially the software running our lives, what does it actually look like to start rewriting that code in a practical way?
Sure. So essentially, it's recognizing those limiting beliefs, which is, take some effort. That's where the reflection comes in. We want to then question whether those beliefs are serving us, whether they are tools or truths. We can figure out, are they really facts or are they just beliefs? Then we want to do, for example, this process. There are many different processes, but my favorite is this turnaround process, where we're asking ourselves, could the exact opposite be true? And then we're going to constantly remind ourselves of these new liberating beliefs. And sometimes it feels a little hokey to believe the exact opposite. But what we're going to do is collect this portfolio of perspectives. We don't have to change our mind. We just have to look at, hey, here's a bunch of different options. We try on one belief. We see how it feels. Are we more motivated to do what we say we're going to do? Do we have less suffering in our life? If we do, great, we keep that belief. If we don't, we can always try a different belief or go back to our default.
Nir, thank you so much for being here for the second. Not everybody's been on my show 2 times. Obviously, we're going to make sure that everybody gets this book because it's perfectly fit for all of the work that we do. And as I told you in the show, before we were talking, this is 100%. And now we know why your best work. And I'm just so excited to find out what happens next. So thanks so much for being here.
That's so kind of you to say. I really appreciate your support. Thank you so much for digesting this book and sharing it with others. I really appreciate it.
There's something simple but powerful in everything that we talked about today. And it's this: your brain is not designed to tell you the truth. It's actually designed to tell you what's familiar. And if you don't question that, you can spend your entire life defending a version of reality that was never actually chosen by you. What if the problem isn't your life, but the predictions that you've stopped questioning? Maybe being a free thinker isn't about having no beliefs, but more so it's about not being owned by your beliefs. It's about being able to say something like this: this is what I see right now, but I'm still open. And in that moment, that space between what you've always believed and that moment, that space between what you've always believed and what else might be true, that might be the moment where everything changes. Bye for now.
This is Nir Eyal, and this podcast makes sense.
Makes sense.